He thought they were ready for marriage until she dropped a bombshell request, "I want an open marriage." What she didn't expect was his response, and who he would find afterward. Watch until the end. Subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. The velvet box felt heavier than it should have in my pocket as I waited for Sarah to arrive at the restaurant. 4 years together, a lifetime of memories planned, and suddenly everything changed with one conversation. Snow fell gently outside the window of our favorite coffee shop. The barista called out orders in a rhythmic cadence that normally brought comfort to my Sunday mornings. But today, nothing could ease the hollow feeling that had taken residence in my chest for the past week. I stared at my untouched Americano, watching as the steam slowly dissipated into the cold winter air, much like my dreams of marrying the woman I thought I knew. My name is Daniel. 3 weeks ago, I was engaged to Sarah, my girlfriend of 4 years. Today, I sit alone, attempting to make sense of how quickly a life planned together can unravel with just a few words. "We need to talk about something before the wedding," Sarah had said that night, her voice oddly detached as she stirred her wine glass without meeting my eyes. The soft glow of our dining room chandelier cast shadows across her face, making it difficult to read her expression. "I've been thinking a lot about our future together." I remember smiling then, assuming she wanted to discuss honeymoon destinations or perhaps a change in our wedding venue. "Of course, babe. What's on your mind?" She took a long sip of her wine, deliberately placing the glass back on the table with precision that felt rehearsed. "I want an open marriage," she finally said, her eyes now locked with mine, searching for a reaction. "I think it would be healthier for us long-term." The words hung between us like an uninvited guest. I waited for the punchline to a joke I clearly wasn't understanding. It never came. "An open marriage," I repeated, certain I had misheard. "As in, seeing other people while we're married?" Sarah nodded, suddenly animated. She leaned forward, speaking quickly as though she'd rehearsed this speech many times. "It makes sense, Daniel. Monogamy is so restrictive and honestly a bit outdated. We're young. We should experience life fully before we're too old to enjoy it." I felt my stomach twist into a knot. Where is this coming from, Sarah? We've never once discussed anything like this in 4 years together. Her expression changed then, a flash of something I couldn't quite identify crossing her features before she composed herself. "I've been doing a lot of reading, talking to friends who have successful open relationships. It's actually more common than you think." "Which friends?" I asked, my mind racing through our social circle, trying to identify who might have planted this seed. "Just some people from work," she replied dismissively. "But this isn't about them, it's about us. About making our marriage stronger by removing the pressure of being everything to each other." I sat back in my chair, studying the woman across from me. Her blonde hair was pulled back in the messy bun I always found endearing. She wore the emerald sweater I had given her last Christmas. Everything about her looked like the Sarah I had fallen in love with, yet her words belonged to a stranger. "So you want to sleep with other people," I stated plainly, needing to cut through the euphemisms. Her cheeks flushed slightly. "It's not just about sex, Daniel. It's about emotional freedom, but yes, physical relationships would be part of it. And you're bringing this up 3 months before our wedding." I could hear the edge in my voice, but couldn't soften it. Sarah sighed, reaching for my hand across the table. I found myself pulling back instinctively. "I thought it would be better to discuss it now rather than after we're married. Isn't that the responsible thing to do?" There was a certain logic to her words that made the situation even more maddening. Yes, better to know now than after vows were exchanged, but the timing suggested something else entirely. "Is there someone specific you have in mind?" I asked quietly, dreading the answer. Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "There's a guy at work," she finally admitted. "Nothing has happened," she quickly added. "I would never cheat on you. That's why I'm bringing this up. I want to be honest." The irony of her claiming moral high ground while essentially asking permission to pursue another man wasn't lost on me. "How considerate of you," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Don't be like that," she frowned. "I'm trying to have an adult conversation about our future." I stood up abruptly, needing distance. "I need some air." The next 3 days passed in a blur of tense conversations and sleepless nights. Sarah accused me of being close-minded, of clinging to outdated notions of relationships. I questioned when exactly she had changed so fundamentally, or if perhaps I had never really known her at all. "We can set boundaries," she insisted as we lay in bed, a gulf of unspoken words between us. Rules that make us both comfortable. There's no rule that would make me comfortable with my wife sleeping with other men, I responded, staring at the ceiling. Then what about just me having emotional connections with others, friendships that might be a little more intimate but not physical? I turned to look at her then. Would you be offering me the same freedom? Of course, she replied too quickly. This would be equal for both of us. And you'd be completely comfortable with me developing intimate friendships with other women, maybe taking them to dinner, texting them late at night. Her expression tightened almost imperceptibly. If that's what you needed to be happy. I don't need that to be happy, Sarah. I need you, just you. That's what I signed up for. She rolled onto her back with a frustrated sigh. You're not even trying to understand. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps I wasn't trying hard enough to embrace her vision of our future. But every time I attempted to imagine it, all I could see was the inevitable end of us. By the fourth day, I had made my decision. I called off the wedding. Sarah was stunned. She had clearly expected me to eventually come around to her way of thinking. When I told her I couldn't marry someone who fundamentally wanted something so different from our relationship, she broke down. I wasn't actually going to do anything, she cried. I just wanted to talk about possibilities. But the damage was done. The trust, once broken, couldn't be easily repaired. I had glimpsed a future I couldn't accept with a partner who suddenly seemed like a stranger. I moved out the following weekend, taking only what I needed, leaving behind the furniture we had chosen together and the life we had planned. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, as I sit in this coffee shop watching couples huddle together against the winter cold, I'm still processing the whiplash of how quickly everything changed. My phone buzzes with another text from Sarah. They've been coming regularly, evolving from anger to bargaining to desperate pleas. Today's reads simply, I made a mistake. Can we please talk? I don't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The truth is, I'm grateful she showed me who she really was before we said I do. Sometimes the most painful endings are actually merciful beginnings in disguise. The aftermath of my broken engagement spread through our social circle like wildfire. Friends took sides, as they inevitably do. Some thought I was overreacting. She just wanted to discuss it, they argued. She didn't actually cheat. Others understood immediately what I had come to realize. The issue wasn't just about potential physical infidelity, but about a fundamental difference in how we viewed commitment. My friend James was firmly in the latter camp. A week after I moved into my sparse new apartment, he showed up with beer and pizza. You look like shit, he observed bluntly as I opened the door. I shrugged, stepping aside to let him in. Thanks, I feel worse. He surveyed my new place, a one-bedroom with minimal furniture, boxes still stacked in corners. Nice bachelor pad, he said, his tone softening. Very minimalist. We sat on my lone couch, the only piece of furniture I had taken from our shared home. Sarah had always hated it, calling it too masculine and uncomfortable. Now it was one of the few familiar things in my new reality. So, James said after we'd each downed half a beer in silence. Want to talk about it? I didn't, but also did. The words came pouring out then, the full story I hadn't shared with anyone yet. How Sarah's request had seemed to come from nowhere. How in retrospect there had been signs, her increased secrecy with her phone, late nights at work, new friends I'd never met. The guy from work, James guessed. You think something was already happening? I took another long drink. I don't know, she swears not. But even if nothing physical happened, something emotional clearly did. James nodded slowly. Emotional affairs can be just as destructive. The thing is, I continued, I keep questioning myself. Am I being outdated, possessive, unreasonable? Some of our friends seem to think so. Let me guess, James snorted. Mallory and that whole crowd. I nodded. Sarah's friend Mallory had always been the wild one in our social group, cycling through relationships with proud disregard for conventional boundaries. She had recently started referring to herself as ethically non-monogamous on social media. She told Sarah I was enforcing patriarchal ownership constructs by not being open to sharing my partner, I said, making air quotes. James nearly choked on his beer. Jesus. Look, Dan, there's nothing wrong with ethical non-monogamy or open relationships if that's what both people genuinely want, the key word being both. You can't be pressured into that kind of arrangement. His words were validating, but I still felt the creeping doubt that had become my constant companion. But what if I'm missing out on some evolved form of relationship that I'm too traditional to understand? Do you want to sleep with other women? James asked directly. No. Do you want Sarah sleeping with other men? My stomach churned at the thought. Definitely not. Then you're not missing out on anything, you're just being honest about what you want and need in a relationship. He leaned forward, eyes serious. And for what it's worth, I think you dodged a bullet. If she brought this up before the wedding, imagine if she'd waited until after. I had considered this many times over the past week. The scenario played out in my mind like a horror film, married, perhaps with children, only to discover my wife had an entirely different vision of our vows than I did. Yeah, I agreed quietly. Better now than later. We finished our beers in companionable silence before James spoke again. You know what you need, to get back out there, not for anything serious, just to remind yourself there are other women in the world. The thought of dating again made me feel exhausted. It's been 3 weeks, man. I'm not saying marry someone new, just come out this weekend. Some of us are hitting that new bar downtown. No pressure, just drinks and conversation. I agreed reluctantly, more to get him to drop the subject than from any genuine interest in socializing, but as he left that night, I felt marginally better than I had in weeks. Perhaps there was a life waiting for me beyond the wreckage of my relationship. The bar James had suggested was crowded and loud, exactly the kind of place I would have avoided even before my breakup. Now, standing awkwardly with a beer I didn't really want, I was regretting my decision to come. The music pulsed at a volume that made conversation difficult, and everywhere I looked were couples wrapped up in each other. You made it. James appeared at my elbow, looking far more comfortable in this environment than I felt. He was accompanied by a few other friends and some people I didn't recognize. Introductions were made, but I immediately forgot everyone's names in the noise and chaos. We claimed a high-top table, and I found myself next to a woman with dark curly hair and an easy smile. First time here, she asked, leaning in to be heard over the music. I nodded. That obvious? You have that I'd rather be anywhere else look, she laughed. I'm Eliza, by the way. Daniel, I replied, finding myself smiling despite my mood. And yes, I would rather be anywhere else, no offense. None taken. I hate places like this too. I only came because my roommate dragged me out. She gestured toward a girl on the dance floor who was enthusiastically dancing with James. Looks like our respective friends might be hitting it off. Good for them, I said, and meant it. The thought of James finding a connection made this whole uncomfortable evening slightly more worthwhile. Eliza and I fell into surprisingly easy conversation. She was a graphic designer, passionate about her work and refreshingly direct in her communication. When the topic inevitably turned to past relationships, I found myself being uncharacteristically open about my recent experience. So your fiancé basically asked for permission to cheat, Eliza summarized after I gave her the abbreviated version. She would say she was suggesting an alternative relationship model, I replied, surprised to find I could almost joke about it now. Eliza rolled her eyes. Look, I have friends in open relationships. When it's something both people want from the beginning, great, but springing it on your partner right before the wedding, that's suspicious timing. Her validation felt good, but I was growing tired of dissecting my failed relationship. Enough about my disaster. What about you? Any engagement horror stories to share? Not quite, she smiled. But I did once date a guy who thought monogamish was a real relationship category. Monogamish, I repeated, confused. His word, not mine. Apparently it meant he was monogamous except when someone really hot was interested in him. She shook her head at the memory. He genuinely couldn't understand why I had a problem with that arrangement. I laughed, the sound surprising me. It had been weeks since I'd found anything genuinely funny. The mental gymnastics some people perform to justify what they want. Exactly, she agreed. I'm all for people living however makes them happy, but be upfront about it. Don't trick someone who wants monogamy into thinking that's what you're offering. As the night progressed, I found myself genuinely enjoying Eliza's company. We exchanged numbers before parting ways with a loose agreement to maybe get coffee sometime. It wasn't a date, just a potential friendship, but it felt like progress nonetheless. For the first time since Sarah's bombshell, I could envision a future that wasn't completely bleak. The next morning, I awoke to multiple missed calls from Sarah. She had been reaching out consistently since our breakup, but I had maintained my distance, needing space to process everything. Today, however, something compelled me to listen to her voicemail. Daniel, please, her voice sounded broken, tearful. I made a terrible mistake. I never should have brought up any of that open marriage nonsense. I was confused and listening to the wrong people. Please call me back. I love you. I only want you. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, conflicting emotions washing over me. Part of me, a larger part than I wanted to admit, still loved her. 4 years together couldn't be erased in a few weeks. But another part, the part that had lain awake night after night imagining her with someone else, wasn't sure if anything could ever be the same again. I didn't call her back, but I did text, "I need more time." Her response was immediate, "Take all the time you need, I'll be here." I spent that Sunday in a state of restless contemplation. I cleaned my apartment, went for a long run, and even started unpacking some of the boxes I had been avoiding. As I placed books on my new shelves, I came across a photo album Sarah had made for our 3rd anniversary. Inside were captured moments of our life together, vacations, holidays, ordinary days made special by our shared joy. Had I been too hasty in walking away? Was one misguided conversation worth throwing away years of love and countless happy memories? These questions followed me into the week, distracting me at work and keeping me awake at night. On Wednesday, I received a text from an unexpected source, Eliza. "Coffee this weekend? I promise not to make you talk about your ex unless you want to." Her message brought a small smile to my face. I replied in the affirmative, suggesting Saturday afternoon. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather. Eliza and I met at a quiet cafe far from the noisy bar where we'd first met. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her curly hair piled atop her head in a casual bun. "So," she said once we were settled with our drinks, "better week than last." "Marginally," I admitted. "You can't complain. Landed a new client, finally convinced my landlord to fix the leaky faucet that's been driving me insane. Small victories." Our conversation flowed easily, touching on work, movies, books we'd recently read. It felt refreshingly uncomplicated compared to the emotional minefield my interactions with Sarah had become. "I have a confession," Eliza said after a comfortable lull. "I looked you up online after we met. Hope that's not too creepy," I laughed. "Standard procedure these days, isn't it? Find anything interesting. Just your impressive portfolio, you're really talented." I felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. As a commercial photographer, I rarely receive direct feedback on my work. "Thanks. I'd love to see your designs sometime," I replied genuinely. "Maybe you will," she smiled, a hint of something more than friendly interest in her eyes. As our coffee date extended into early evening, I found myself reluctant for it to end. Eliza was easy to talk to, funny and refreshingly straightforward. When she suggested dinner, I agreed without hesitation. Over pasta at a nearby Italian restaurant, our conversation deepened. We shared childhood stories, career aspirations, and perspectives on life that revealed a surprising alignment of values. When the topic of relationships inevitably arose again, I found myself being candid about my ongoing confusion regarding Sarah. "She's been calling," I admitted, "saying she made a mistake, that she only wants me." Eliza considered this thoughtfully. "Do you believe her?" "I don't know," I sighed. "Part of me wants to. We were together for 4 years. Planned a whole life. It's hard to just walk away from that. But another part of you wonders if you can ever truly trust her perspective again." Eliza finished my thought. I nodded, surprised at how accurately she had read my conflict. "Exactly. If she was so certain about wanting an open marriage 3 weeks ago, how can she be equally certain she doesn't want it now?" Eliza placed her fork down, giving me her full attention. "Can I offer an outside perspective? You don't have to take it." "Please." I welcomed the input of someone who wasn't emotionally invested in my relationship with Sarah. "It sounds like she might have been infatuated with someone and used the idea of an open marriage as a way to pursue that without technically cheating," Eliza suggested carefully. "And now that you've shown you're willing to walk away rather than agree to her terms, she's panicking. Maybe the other guy wasn't interested in anything serious, or maybe she realized what she was risking, but either way her certainty seems situational rather than principled." Her assessment landed like a stone in my stomach, not because it was harsh, but because it articulated exactly what I had been unable to acknowledge to myself. Sarah's sudden interest in open relationships hadn't come from thoughtful consideration of relationship models. It had come from wanting a specific person while keeping me as a safety net. "That makes a lot of sense," I said quietly. Eliza reached across the table, briefly touching my hand before withdrawing. "Sorry if that was overstepping. I just know how easy it is to doubt yourself when someone you love is telling you what you want to hear." "No, I appreciate the honesty. Everyone else is either firmly on Team Sarah or Team Daniel, It's refreshing to talk to someone who's just focused on the situation itself. As dinner concluded and we stood outside the restaurant preparing to part ways, I felt a reluctance to end our evening. Eliza seemed to share the sentiment. "This was nice," she said, smiling up at me. "We should do it again sometime." "Definitely," I agreed. Then, feeling a sudden boldness, I added, "Maybe an actual date next time." Her smile widened. "I'd like that." We hugged goodbye, a brief embrace that carried the promise of something more. As I watched her walk toward her car, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in weeks. Not the giddy infatuation of a new romance, but something more grounded, the reassurance that life continued beyond heartbreak, offering new connections when you least expected them. The following Tuesday, Sarah texted asking to meet in person. After careful consideration, I agreed. Not because I was reconsidering our relationship, but because I recognized we needed proper closure. We met at a neutral location, a park bench where we had often spent sunny afternoons in the early days of our relationship. Sarah looked different somehow, smaller perhaps, or maybe I was just seeing her through new eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice carrying none of its usual confidence. "I've missed you so much, Daniel." "I've missed aspects of our life together," I replied truthfully, "but I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks." Hope flickered across her features. "Me too. I was so wrong to suggest that open marriage nonsense. I don't know what I was thinking." I studied her face, searching for the authenticity I had once never questioned. "What changed your mind?" She looked away briefly before meeting my gaze again. "I realized what I was risking. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I nearly threw it all away because of some stupid idea." "Was it just an idea, Sarah? Or was there someone specific you wanted to pursue with my permission?" Her silence was confirmation enough. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "It doesn't matter now. I realized it was just a stupid crush, nothing compared to what we have." Had she said these words 3 weeks ago, I might have been relieved, even grateful for her honesty. Now they only reinforced my decision. "The thing is, it does matter," I said gently. "Not because of who it was, but because of what it reveals about how differently we view commitment. I want someone who wants only me, not someone who settles for me after exploring other options." Tears welled in her eyes. "That's not fair. Everyone has temptations. I was trying to be honest rather than cheating like most people would." "I understand that's how you see it," I acknowledged. "And maybe there's some truth there. But asking for an open marriage 3 months before our wedding wasn't just about honesty. It was about wanting something fundamentally different than what I thought we both wanted." "People change their minds," she protested. "I've changed mine. I was wrong." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what needed to be said. "The problem is, I don't know if I can ever fully trust that you won't change your mind again. Marriage is hard enough without wondering if my wife is secretly resenting the monogamy she agreed to." Sarah wiped at her tears angrily. "So that's it. 4 years together and you're throwing it all away because of one mistake." "It wasn't just a mistake, Sarah. It was a revelation of incompatible values. And I'm not throwing anything away, I'm acknowledging what's already broken." We sat in heavy silence, the finality of our separation settling between us. Eventually, Sarah spoke again, her voice hollow. "Is there someone else? Is that what this is really about?" The question surprised me. "No," I answered honestly. "This is about us, not anyone else." I thought briefly of Eliza, but knew she wasn't the reason for my decision. She was simply a confirmation that life continued, that connections were still possible in the aftermath of heartbreak. "I should go," Sarah finally said, standing. She hesitated, looking down at me with red-rimmed eyes. "For what it's worth, I really do love you. I always have." "I know," I replied softly. "I loved you too. That's why this hurts so much." She nodded once and then walked away. I remained on the bench long after she disappeared from view, expecting to feel the crushing weight of finality. Instead, I felt something unexpected: peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the quiet assurance that I had made the right decision for both of us. 2 months later, I was having dinner with Eliza at my apartment when my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Everything okay?" Eliza asked, noticing my expression change as I read the message. I handed her my phone. "Thought you should know. Sarah's seeing that guy from her office now, officially." "Sorry, man." Eliza studied my face carefully. "How do you feel about that?" I considered the question honestly. "Validated, mostly. It confirms what we suspected about her sudden interest in open relationships." "And personally, does it hurt?" "Less than I would have expected," I admitted. Mostly I feel sorry for her. If this was the guy she was willing to risk our relationship for, she could have just broken up with me honestly. Eliza handed back my phone. Some people fear being alone more than they value honesty. Her insight, as always, cut straight to the heart of the matter. In the month since our first coffee date, Eliza had become not just a romantic partner but a trusted confidante. Our relationship had progressed slowly, deliberately, both of us mindful of my recent heartbreak. "You're very wise, you know that." I told her, reaching across the table to take her hand. She smiled. "Not wise, just experienced in my own ways. We all make mistakes. The important thing is what we learn from them." Later that evening, as we sat comfortably on my couch watching a movie, I found myself reflecting on the strange path that had led me here. Had Sarah never asked for an open marriage, I would likely be married to her now, unaware of the fundamental incompatibility at the heart of our relationship. I might never have met Eliza, never experienced the particular joy of being with someone whose values so naturally aligned with my own. "What are you thinking about?" Eliza asked, noticing my distraction. "Just how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be," I replied. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Does that mean you're where you need to be?" I looked down at her, this woman who had entered my life at my lowest point and helped me rebuild something new and unexpectedly wonderful. "I think I am." It wasn't the future I had once planned. There was no guarantee that what Eliza and I were building would last forever. But for the first time in months, I was genuinely excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. Not because I was certain of the outcome, but because I was certain of myself and what I truly wanted. Sometimes I realized the greatest gift isn't getting what you think you want, but discovering what you actually need. Sarah's request for an open marriage hadn't destroyed my chance at happiness. It had redirected me toward a more authentic version of it. As Eliza and I settled back into watching our movie, I felt profound gratitude for the painful honesty that had ultimately set me free. Epilogue: 1 year to the day after Sarah asked for an open marriage, I found myself back at the restaurant where I had once planned to propose to her. This time, however, I sat across from Eliza, celebrating 6 months of official dating. "You know, most guys wouldn't bring their current girlfriend to a place with so much history," Eliza teased as we studied the menus. "Most guys haven't been lucky enough to find someone who understands the value of reclaiming spaces," I countered. She smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "True, so are we ordering the same thing you planned to get that night?" I laughed at her intuition. "Actually, yes, is that weird?" "Not weird, poetic, finishing something that was interrupted." As we enjoyed our meal, I marveled at how different I felt from the man who had once sat in this very spot, ring box burning a hole in his pocket. That man had been certain he knew what love was supposed to look like. This version of me understood that real love wasn't about fulfilling an image or meeting external expectations. It was about finding someone who shared your fundamental values and vision for life. Eliza and I had taken things slowly, both of us carrying lessons from past relationships. We had disagreements, of course, moments of insecurity or miscommunication. But beneath it all was a solid foundation of shared principles that made navigating those challenges feel like a joint endeavor rather than an adversarial process. "I have something for you," I said as we finished dessert. "Not a ring," I quickly added, seeing her eyes widen. "We're not there yet." I pulled out a small wrapped package and slid it across the table. Eliza unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound journal. "Open it," I encouraged. Inside, on the first page, I had written, "For recording our adventures big and small, here's to creating a story worthy of these pages." Eliza looked up, eyes bright with emotion. "I love it, and the sentiment behind it." "I've been thinking a lot about stories lately," I explained. "How we tell them, how they shape us. A year ago, I thought my story had ended. Now I realize it was just taking an unexpected turn." "The best stories usually do," she replied. Later that night, as we walked hand in hand under a clear sky filled with stars, I reflected on the strange serendipity of life. Had Sarah never asked for that open marriage, had I never called off our wedding, I wouldn't be here now, experiencing this particular happiness with this particular person. I still occasionally heard updates about Sarah through mutual friends. She and the office guy hadn't lasted. Last I heard, she was dating someone new and taking things slowly. I wished her well, genuinely. We had both learned valuable lessons from our time together and its painful end. "Penny for your thoughts," Eliza asked, squeezing my hand. Just grateful, I replied, for unexpected detours and second chances. She smiled up at me, her face illuminated by moonlight. Me too.